Hi and welcome to Lois and Morgana Davidson Art. It's Lois here and today I'm going back to basics and I'm painting this really simple loose watercolour landscape. I'm just using a limited palette of 3 colours, that's raw sienna, Paynes grey and burnt umber, and with these 3 colours I'm just looking for atmosphere and mood and to create a composition that leads the viewer's eye through the painting but uses very few brush strokes. The aim of this painting is to keep it really loose and to paint absolutely no detail, but just to use washes and marks to suggest the detail here. And that really, I suppose, is the essence of loose watercolour painting. I'm going to use Millford cold pressed paper. It's 11 inches by 15 inches or 28 centimetres by 38 centimetres. It's taped to my board with ordinary decorator's masking tape, and my board's at an angle of about 45 degrees and gravity will help with the painting. I'm using a Princeton Neptune Aqua Elite flat modeler brush, 1.5 inches, to wet the sky all over, and then I shall randomly wet a little bit of the land area, leaving some of it dry, and that should give me some soft and hard edges where the paint will diffuse into the wet areas and resist the drier areas. So my first colour, raw sienna, goes into the sky to add a little bit of a glow, and I'll pull some of that same colour down into my landscape. And then mixing up my other 2 colours, which is Paynes grey and burnt umber, I'm going to introduce that across, bring the paint in shallow diagonals tending upwards from left to right, leaving some gaps between the brush strokes and painting wet in wet to create a sort of atmospheric sky that looks like it's blowing in over the crest of this small hill that I'm going to be painting. Putting some more of the raw sienna between the darker marks, trying to make sure that the sky is darker at the top and lighter where it meets the horizon or the top of the hill, because that's where I'm going to place my tree line, and using the dark mixture and the tips of this brush, just putting in a wash across the top of the hill, varying up my tones, values and hues a little. You can see everything's still softening and diffusing because I'm painting wet in wet, but this tree line is showing up really nicely against the paler part of the sky. A single tree just on the right helps to balance out the composition. And then cleaning up below the tree line with a clean damp flat brush gives us a nice look to where the tree line meets the top of that hill. And now picking up a nice big brushful of this dark colour, sweeping it across my foreground, leaving a gap between this big brush stroke and the trees, and keeping the same sort of angle, or rather mirroring the angle of the clouds, will give me an interesting and satisfying composition for the land. The lay of the land will then lead the viewer's eye into the painting. So as you can see, I'm not painting any detail. All I'm doing is painting marks and washes and allowing those marks and washes to suggest detail to the viewer. Because the viewer knows this is supposed to be a landscape painting, then the idea is that they will then be able to interpret through context the marks that I'm making as those of a landscape. Then using a mixture of all 3 colours, putting in some scribbly brushwork at the front, which I will then take the corner of a plastic store card, or you could use your fingernail or a palette knife. I'm going to scrape through some random marks into that richer paint in the foreground, and that hopefully will work to suggest a tangle of brambles, plants, flowers, that sort of thing. And then again, using the card, I'm going to go into the wash that I created my distant trees with and scrape in a few tree trunks so that the lost edges of the trees in my wash now has some found edges, i.e. those marks that I've just made for the trunks, and that helps to establish that illusion of detail in the trees. I'm now going to leave it to dry completely, and then once it's dry, come back and just add a couple of tiny details just to bring the painting together and make it pop a little bit more. So here it is, it's nice and dry, and I've decided that I just need to do a little bit of negative painting with a mixture of Paynes grey and burnt umber, quite a watery mixture. I want it dark but not too dark. I'm going to paint between some of the lighter areas in that tree line to create some light trunks which will contrast with some of the darker trunks and just make that area stand out a little bit more. Because it's in the distance, I don't want it to be too dark, but the values have to be right there in order for that suggestion to convince a viewer that these are distant trees. Because I'm painting with wet paint onto a dry painting, nothing is softening or diffusing, so I can just blend it with a little smudge of my finger and soften it in places. And now I can go on continuing with the same brush, which is a small unbranded calligraphy brush that I bought from eBay a couple of years ago, and add in a few more brush strokes using this dark colour, some dry brush and some ordinary brush strokes mixed in together around the marks that I made earlier, just to add a little bit more oomph and detail or suggestions of detail to the brambles and weeds in the foreground. And here's the finished painting. If you paint something similar, you may want to add birds. I think they'd work really well, sort of breaking up into the sky from those distant trees. But I quite like the plain bleakness of this, so I'm going to leave it as it is. This demo is part of a 4-part tutorial over on Patreon that looks up ways of loosening up your painting style and trying to create the illusion of detail rather than having to focus on the detail itself. So if you're interested in that, please follow the link below. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave us a like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, because that really helps with our reach. And thank you so much to everybody that supports us on Patreon. Morgana will be back on Monday with another wonderful demo. I'll be back on Wednesday, so have a lovely weekend. I'll see you soon, and happy painting. Bye.